My name is Dominic Burton. I'm the awards manager at the Australian Academy of Science. So the idea, hopefully, is I'm going to briefly give an overview of the awards that the Academy offers and some of the minutiae in terms of deadlines and then follow up by what hopefully are some tips that could be handy and useful that, I picked up from observing awards committees along the way. And just to mention that part of a small staff here at the Academy, and we support awards committees, which are made up of experts in their field and Academy fellows who consider these application nominations. So I'm not going to come from a science point of view or in terms of the feedback I can give or help I can give maybe later would be more in the sort of administrative and background and how to get a nomination in and the sort of things that people ask us and that we see and that awards committee members comment on perhaps during awards committee meetings. So hopefully that will be help. The Academy of Science mission is to provide independent, authoritative, and influential scientific advice, promotes international scientific engagement, builds public awareness and understanding of science, and champions, celebrates, and supports excellence in Australian science. So, reading that all out, but basically to show that where the awards fit in. So, where the awards are there to champion and celebrate and support excellence in science. So, we do this through acknowledging people's scientific achievements through the Honorific Awards, through giving medals, but also honorific amounts in some cases. But we also, as you see later, we have lecture tours and we fund conferences. And basically, the idea is to support and showcase the wonderful science that are out there. And we do that through the awards, but also the Academy has other ways of doing this, but that's where the awards fit in. So yes, we have 25 honorific awards currently that distinguish research in 3 categories, and they're the early career category, that's up to 10 years post-PhD, the mid-career category, which is 8 to 15 years, and premier and career honorifics, which are careers over recognized achievements over the whole career. We have 3 premier awards, McFarlane Burnett, Flinders, and Ruby Payne Scott. And that's the recent category there, and those are the highest awards that the Academy offers. And basically, I'm going to go into a bit more detail on these categories because it's important to know that though they are 10 years post-PhD, there are conditions where we can take into account career disruptions. Even further to that, if you have for every 6 months of career disruption, and you can put this in the nomination itself, you can, for every year of career disruption, you can add 6 months pro rata. So, so when individuals look at that and they say, oh, 10 years post-PhD, I don't fit in the cutoff. And this is a sort of detail that can assist because it could mean that somebody actually could fit within the 10 years post-PhD. And also importantly, some people presume that it's 10 years post-PhD to the award nomination date. So, and that's the 1st of May. So then they calculate it to the 1st of May, but actually it's to the calendar year. So it's the first of the first 2012 would be where they'd be calculating it from, not from May. So those small details, yes, you can find it out because it's on the website and in the category and in the criteria. But those are the sort of things that if somebody sees an award straight away and they go, oh yeah, I don't fit within that, it might be worth taking a little bit more time to look in and say, oh, actually, I can see that, I can just fit in. So maybe that could assist you there. Yeah, the Premier Awards, as I mentioned, are those. The early career are listed, mid-career, the Career Awards. This is all on our website, but just to list them there to see the spread of awards that we have. Yeah, there are quite a lot of fields. Some are specific, some are broader, some are open to women only. and some are biennial. So all of that sort of detail I'm not going to go into here, but are up on the website, but that's just listing them all. And then there's funding. So those are the honorific awards. And I'll just go back to that slide because the deadline's the 1st of May, and that's a deadline to put your nominations in by. So that's, you submit your documentation in there, and part of that is listing referees. So individuals, independent and non-independent, you can have a mixture of those, but you need to at least have 3 references minimum, and 2 need to be independent, and one needs to be international at least in that as a minimum. But those individuals get sent requests by the Academy, and it's done automatically online when your submission is made, to fill in a referee report for you. So they see your CV and a brief summary of your nomination, and quite a lot of your nomination actually. And they comment on your suitability for the award, and there's criteria that they need to follow, and that's up on the website as well. But basically, they have until the 1st of June to come back with their references, and then that's when your nominations are to be considered, and they'll be considered until around October, which is, well, they're considered until September, end of September, and then October is when council looks at the recommendations of the award committees on who should be, who they're recommending for the award, and who should be shortlisted for following rounds, because when you're shortlisted, you can only be carried forward if you are eligible or not to be carried forward, so that you can be considered in the next round, so that you can get another chance at it if you're quite close to being awarded. So that's on honorifics, and I'm moving over to funding, and I'll probably talk about honorifics a bit more later in the tips section. But just to mention that we also have direct funding. We have just under, or depending on the year, but just under 400,000 that we give to support research conferences, and traveling fellowships across 15 awards schemes. Some of those are biennial, but most of them are annual awards, and they vary. Briefly, where does the money come from? Most of it is from donations from wills and bequests. Some comes from companies, very few do, and they are, and it's mentioned when they are, and foundations sort of where individuals were based when they were alive, quite often is they contribute as well. So basically, it's quite independent funding source, and we manage those on behalf of those estates, so to speak. We have research conferences. We have 3 of those, and the physical, biological, and the Fenner Conference on the Environment specifically. And these are the research awards. Again, all the details are up on the website, but just to list them there on one page. And traveling fellowships, some of those are biennial as well. Most of them are for international scientists to come to Australia, but some are to go out, Australian scientists and New Zealand scientists to go out, and depends and the fields are listed there as well. The application deadline for those is the 1st of June. And so I was skipping through all that relatively quickly to go to the tip section. So these are just some points that they're not exhaustive, but there are some things that might be worth mentioning, and apologies if some of it comes across as obvious, but there's no point not mentioning everything, even if some people have seen it before. So yes, as I mentioned earlier, just if you're interested in an award, or if you hear about it and it's in your field, just delve into it, because if you think you're not eligible, it's not always the case. As I said, there's that as the post-PhD criteria. That's something that some people might find out only when they start delving in, and they can presume that they don't qualify straight away. They don't know that we give career exemptions until you look at the minutiae. And also the fields. If you think that the fields don't cover your fields, quite often you can find out by previous awardees whether who's received it previously, because that can give you an indication of actually maybe their fields can be wider than what you first presume. But also you can always ask the academy or the administrative team. That's what we're here for, and there's nothing such as too many questions. And if you're worried at all, we're not even part of the assessment process, so we're here to deliver your nomination forward. So there's nothing in terms of bothering people too much or anything like that. It's quite the opposite. We're quite used to it. Any question, font size, can you double check my career eligibility? That's fine. So please do that. And that's my second point. So there you go. And it's absolutely normal and expected to ask senior academicians to nominate or support you, even if you don't know them. And this is maybe a worry. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I don't know that individual," or "I can't ask my head of department. I don't even hardly ever talk to them or meet them," or something like that. It's normal, and they're used to it. And in fact, they know that it's part of the process. It's they've been through it. It's not odd. In fact, quite the opposite. They'll see that you're doing what you should be doing, which is putting yourself forward. You can, and when you say putting yourself forward, you can't nominate yourself for these awards. You need to have someone to nominate you. But it's fine to approach individuals, and don't feel that it's if you haven't done it before, it's normal, and they expect it even. So please do. Yes, part of nomination extend nomination deadlines. Obviously, if you can't meet a deadline, you can't meet a deadline. That happens sometimes, but and they are pretty fixed. I mean, some organizations are extremely fixed. The website cuts you off. Our website does have a switch off currently, and systems change all the time. But you can always ask, because you never know. I mean, when I can, it just needs to be fair. That's what it's all about. At the end of the day, you can't extend a deadline for an individual because you need fairness. But if it's a few hours afterwards and it hasn't gone to the awards committee, and the thing is, we can't send applications out to awards committee after the fact. So that just messes with their time and the system and the time schedule. But if there is a few hours in there, or if there was a glitch, or if there's any way where we can help, we do try. But it also boils down to fairness. So usually you can't extend deadlines. But if you really missed one, just ask. You never know. Yes, this is an important one. I think. I think so. Because we get emails sometimes saying, why didn't the nomination go forward? I think they're amazing, great, and up there. And it doesn't mean that if you're not awarded, doesn't mean that you're not of the level required, because this is the same for research awards, perhaps even more so. There's a limited amount of funding, and two amazing candidates are next to each other, and they need to decide on one, so they do. It doesn't mean that the other one wouldn't have got in another year. And this sort of links to the next point, which is keep trying, because if you look at it that way, if you're not in the round, if you're not in it, you've got to be in it to win it. So the thing is that it sometimes is because you're almost, you could say, unlucky, because in that round you're against another candidate who for whatever reason, it just fit more criteria, or they just picked you at the post. So keep trying. If you didn't get it, it doesn't mean that you're not level required. Don't feel that it's a knockback. It's just part of the process. Everybody who's been in there has applied numerous times, and just keep trying. And if anything, your process might even get better with the more attempts you put in. So that's all I'd say. Get a nomination in. So don't be too. This links to the earlier one about getting senior academicians in there. If you can't find anyone, or you don't feel that you can approach that individual to write the nomination, because it's a lot of work. What we have done is that we've changed the process recently, So we've allowed it so that individuals can nominate on behalf of someone. And the reason why we've done that is feedback from the research officers, because the research officers, quite often they help to put, and you can go to your research office to help you as well on this point, put your nomination forward. In fact, that's a big avenue too, and that's their role as well in some institutes, in most institutes. So what they can do is they can log in, and as the institute's user, and they can put nominations forward. And so the reason I say is just get your nomination in is, yes, it might be important to some extent who's nominating you, and that will play into there perhaps. But the fact is you need to get the nomination in, because when the facts are there on what you've done and your case for the award and your references that come in, that's what's considered, and that's the most important thing. So if you're being deterred to put a nomination in because it's a lot of work for a nominator, or you're finding it hard to find someone, you can actually put the nomination documentations together. Obviously, get somebody. You can't nominate yourself, so you need to get somebody to be okay to back your nomination, and they need to be ideally be a scientist who has some standing to be able to put that the case forward in a meaningful way. But they'll get a copy of all the nomination documentation. So even though you would be involved in putting it together, or the research office putting your CV in there and summary of your work and things like that, they'll get a copy of all of that. So it's not as if somebody can write. They wouldn't be writing things which their nominator will see it, so they'll be able to concur or not if that's fact. And obviously I would suggest get them to see the documentations before you put it through, but just to know that that's a way you can do it. So I'll move on from that, but just get your nomination, and I'd say, and then get it considered. Yes, I did mention that. Yeah, well, actually, not in detail. If you're really looking to get somebody, I think some people feel that the nominator needs to be the highest, most influential person that they can get to put the nomination forward. And if you can do that, that's great. But sometimes, like for instance, in the Academy's case, the nominator mostly puts together, a CV and a brief summary of the person's work. There isn't really a place for the nominator to expand on how amazing the individual is. It's more sort of the fact. It's someone who's pulling the facts together and saying, this is a short summary of their work, and they can say how great the person is in there. But you tend to find sometimes that if you name that person as a referee, they'll still be as part of the nomination, and the committee will see their name there and see, if they're an influential person in the field, they'll be involved, but they'll be able to directly write to your nomination and say, why you are the person who should get the award. They have more freedom in the referee section than as a nominator. They can put some words in there, but it's more sort of a pulling together an information exercise if you're a nominator. So I'd suggest get them more as a referee than as your nominator, and you can get research office to be the person pulling your nomination together. Yeah, writing your application for an expert. I know this is tricky because you want to put forward your best foot forward, but also be aware that awards committees, and I believe this is a case. It depends on the award, but for a lot of awards out there, particularly awards which are quite broad, like in the biological sciences, the awards committee they won't tend to have someone who in your particular field to assess your application. Obviously, the awards committees do have to be as broad as possible, and there will be individuals on there who will probably either be in your field or very close field. So just be aware of that when you're writing the nomination, that obviously not don't dumb things down, because these are very high-ranking scientists who will know how to see a nomination, have been involved in this thing, in the past, have put it together, but just write it in a way that is accessible to them, so then they can see, oh yeah, I can see where why that's the case, or that they're pointing to those parameters which are quite clear for a scientist to convince them, basically. So don't write in too complicated and specific jargon in your field. But obviously, if you feel that you need to mention particular things and they do need to be written in that way, then do. But don't just put that throughout. I'd suggest. Now, get someone to read it through to see if it reads well, because half of it as well is the assessors are reading lots of applications, and if it makes it easier for them to see the worth of a candidate in a well-written nomination, that can only be a good thing, because you can't expect them to decipher an application that's really hard to read. It's hard for them to pull out the facts, and they'll try, but it make it easier for them. So I'd say, get someone to read it through. Don't leave anything presumed. Oh, yes. Make items such as impact, work, level of contribution to joint works unambiguous. Yeah, so in nominations, sometimes your work very well, so you just put down, I did this, or this is the paper, and you name yourself in the paper. We actually do ask in the nomination that in the guidelines that people expand on this, but just make that's an important point, because though you may know your contribution to the work, the committees don't. So they're coming at it sometimes blind. They might not know you, and so they're relying on the information in front of them and the referee statements to see how you contributed to the work. So what your involvement was. So if you were key and you were the main driving person, a force of this paper or this particular development, put it down there. And there's nothing such as blowing your own trumpet, because this is the whole exercise of a nomination. You have to put yourself forward. So it doesn't matter if you think it comes across as, I'm great, I'm wonderful, and that kind of language. I'm not saying use that language, but it's normal to be selling yourself, so to speak. And in fact, it might even be easier in a sense that it's sort of written from a nominator's point of view. So you aren't actually writing it directly about yourself. But in the research awards, and I'm talking mainly for the honorifics here when I mention that, but for the research awards, it's less a case of talking about your whole career. It's more a case of talking about the specific science. And so you don't have to go into that as much. We're talking about honorific career awards. And when I mentioned earlier about not talking specifically to your science, that's also the case for research awards. But obviously with research awards, you do have to go into the science in more detail than if you would in an honorific award. But then again, still know that even for the research awards, they are a bit more focused in their field. So you will get individuals in your particular field more than likely, but also keep that broad in terms of a scientist in the general field being able to understand what you're putting forward. Small thing, check upload size in advance. I know it's an example of the sort of forward planning that you might need to do, because award systems are all different, and some of them are clunky. We try not to make them clunky, but they can tend to be in development stages. And so if there is like a file size limit, you don't want to be stressed with that at the last minute when you're uploading your 64-page CV. And then you realize maybe it should be 50 pages, or I'm not joking, it's to be file sizes, things like that, just the technicalities of nominating. Maybe do a dummy upload. I'm not saying do a dummy submission, because that's going to just mess with the system, awards system, but just check your upload. Don't wait for your last year of eligibility. Yes, sometimes you hear that the 10 years post PhD, someone's waiting in that 10th year saying, oh, I'm not going to be considered until the 10th year, because that's when I'll have the most under my belt and be able to punch the hardest. Yes, that might be the case, and there's good logic there. But as I said, you're in year to year competing with individuals competing. You're being compared to. You're in a sense, it's a competition. It is a competition. So if you just happen to be in your final year and then you come across and you're being put at the same time as somebody who's also as amazing as yourself, and that makes it harder for you to receive the award. So I'd say if you can put it in even before your final year of eligibility. I'm not saying put it in in the first year, unless you have a huge breakthrough that you think would be able to have you considered, then by all means. The only limit is that you can only be considered 3 years in a row, and unless there's committee have considered you and you're shortlisted and then they give you an extension. So they can make exceptions to that rule, but generally that's it's to avoid repeat year-on-year nominations when people aren't being considered or shortlisted, let's say. So there's a 3-year, and then you need to have a gap before, and you don't want to have that gap in your final year. So what I'm saying is, maybe don't do it 3 years in a row, from year 6, because then in year 10 you won't be considered, and that's probably the year with your most experience. There's small detail, but basically don't leave it to your last year, but then don't keep on every single year as well, because there are sort of limits to that. And ask for feedback. That's after the process. It's not always the case that we can give feedback. In fact, we rarely can, because awards committees consider a lot of nominations and there isn't really the capacity, but I know in some places there is. And usually when an award committee have a particular point that they really want to pass on, then they ask us to pass it on, and we do it as part of the process anyway. But it's worth asking, because again, the individuals such as myself, we're here to assist the whole process, and the better process, the better results we get. So no question is a silly question. If ever anyone, I think we've heard that all the way through school, and it same applies here. And there's no point worrying about asking for feedback or asking for more details on a particular award or anything that's not clear to you. Because if it's not clear to you, maybe it's because it wasn't written very clearly, and it can be rewritten. So in fact, sometimes we actually want the feedback because some things need to be clarified, and we wait to hear from people on things like that.